Welcome back to Mecha March Madness. Now, we have covered quite a few robot doubles made by the good Dr. Ivo Eggman Robotnik. But considering all the doubles he's made of all the furries, and the fact that he puts his face on just about everything, surely he's made a robot double of himself at some point, right? Well, of course he has, and quite a few of them, actually, because now that I mentioned that face thing, this sort of makes this particular list very dicey, because what actually counts as a robot versus what's just a vehicle or a spacecraft or a bomb or whatever. And some of his robot doubles don't even have his face at all. My point is, we're probably gonna miss some here or there, and we might have some technicalities slipping through the cracks. I don't have a particular rule set to go by here. I just did the best I could as I scoured through the many canons, lore, and timelines of the Sonic universe. And this is what I found. Here is a list of the many versions of Metal Eggman. Even though none of these robots are called Metal Eggman. Stop the presses, editing Nick here. While we've never had anything officially confirmed to be called Metal Eggman, that might not have been entirely true at one point. As it turns out, there is an unused Eggman robot found in the files of Sonic Runners. It's just regular old Eggman, but with some bolts and stuff on him, but that's enough to make him look incredibly creepy. But there you go. We technically have a Metal Eggman, or we almost did at any rate. And I need to shout out Mad Rabbit Videos for pointing this out to me before this video went live. So had to jump in here, had to throw this up super quick, add it to the list. Thank you, Mad Rabbit. Also, thank you to Pup, who shows off even more Eggman robots I don't explicitly mention in the audio. Anyway, back to your regularly scheduled robots. At the end of Sonic the Hedgehog 2 lies one final fight with the good doctor, as he famously outpaces the hedgehog and jumps into the head of a much larger version of himself. This is the Death Egg Robot, and what it lacks in creativity with that name, it makes up for in difficulty with this fight, breaking the hearts of many 90s children, myself included, as you have to learn all of his attack patterns after already taking down Mecha Sonic. And if you screw up once, you have to take on your mechanical copy and this big boy all over again. Now, it might go without saying, but this isn't quite the same thing as a Metal or Mecha Sonic, or really any of the robot doubles we usually cover in this marathon. And we will get to some proper robot doubles in good time, but you can't really talk about a subject like this without also talking about one of Eggman's most famous mechs. The guy does tend to be hands-on with a lot of his own machines, and there are no shortage of mechs themed after the good doctor himself. The Death Egg Robot appears all over the place in other media, and is often called back to since the days of Sonic 4, having reappeared in Sonic Generations, Mania, and little cameos all over the place here and there. It is intimidating in its first encounter, as you'd expect, being the final boss of Sonic 2, with spike gauntlets that launch towards the player, a rocket pack capable of making this beast go airborne in an attempt to squash you like an overripe blueberry, and having a very limited window of attack on your end, which is made all the more difficult with the lack of ring protection. In its future appearances, it's made easier since you usually are protected by rings, but in the case of Sonic 4, it's made far more tedious, requiring more than a few smacks to properly take down. And in Mania and Generations, while it presents some more memorable battles, since they are the first actual boss fights of each respective game, it doesn't carry the same intimidating air as that first encounter. And from there, they would take the name of the Death Egg Robot and slap it on more appropriately generic robots, especially that final fight in Sonic Forces. What the hell was that about? Regardless, it's one of the most iconic bosses in the entire series, and served as the basis for other mechas that are based off Eggman, including the Egg Emperor from Sonic Heroes and Generations 3DS, the Final Weapon from 3D Blast, the Egg Breaker and Egg Dealer from Shadow the Hedgehog, the Egg Robo from Lost World, and keep that term in mind, we will be coming back to it, or like half the bosses from Sonic Superstars, including a far more frustrating Death Egg Robot, but this time with a samurai theme. Most of these Eggman copies serve as the final fight in their respective games, or you know, the initial ending before you unlock harder fights with Chaos Emeralds or other campaigns, that kind of crap. But as I mentioned, Eggman does plaster his visage on other boss battles. Just depends on how loosey-goosey you want to get with the idea of a robot copy. The mechas were already pushing it, and some of these bosses are just Eggman's face. The early spin-off games at the very least gave us some actual robot doubles, like this bouncing schmuck from Sonic Chaos, or this super creepy smiling bomb thing from Sonic Labyrinth, which is nothing but a floating head by the end of the fight. And none of them compare to the nightmares hiding in Mount Mobius. In Sonic Spinball, you have to go up against Scorpius, which, yes, is a scorpion with Dr. Robotnik's face, and it lets out a horrible sound as you attempt to kill it. And while Scorpius wasn't in the 8-bit version of the game, they would replace it with a floating iron head of Robotnik. We're gonna get a lot of floating heads in this video. Spoilers. Like right now, here comes some more. This is the Robo Boiler. I don't know why a boiler needs to be filled with heads, but if we start questioning the logic of this series now, we're gonna be here a long time. Even the Roboticizer, or Vago machine, as it's called in the game, kinda looks like Robotnik, if you want to count it. But yeah, as you can see, we have no shortage of options already, and it's very likely I might already be missing some of those options. And like I already said, some of these don't even technically count as robots the same way as the metals do, but before we move away from the mechas properly, there is one more prominent one we do need to discuss. Of this entire list, there is only one robot that actually goes by the name of Metal Robotnik. Now, to be clear, there is a Mecha Robotnik, but that's because the first name of the character is Mecha and her last name is Robotnik, and she's like the robot daughter to Eggman in the Archie universe. No, it's not Sage, it's a different robot. It's a whole thing. I don't have time to get into it. And in case you're wondering if this Metal Robotnik translates to Metal Eggman in Japan, it does not. Over there, they call this bot Black Eggman. Anyway, in the Sonic OVA, Robotnik enlists the aid of Sonic, saying that Metal Robotnik came out of nowhere and took over his space in Robotropolis. And when Sonic and Tails make their way towards the Doctor's lair, they are stopped in an abandoned city by this robotic duplicate, rocking the hell out of his Dracula drip. I will be covering the OVA in greater detail another time. I really love it. I actually forgot how much I love it. But just to keep things focused on this robot, outside of the rotund nature of its silhouette, there's not much here that actually resembles his fleshy counterpart. Obviously, the real Robotnik can't turn his fingers into a gun, which I gotta say, I love how that's animated, spins around like a Gatling gun, then one of the hands holds the other hand like a gun. I'm saying gun too much, but my point is it's cool as hell. Also, there are missiles that come out of his love handles, and he shoots sticky stuff out of his, Yeah, so this arsenal proves to be a problem for our heroes, that glue especially, as well as his armor, which is made out of a polymer alloy. I'm ashamed to admit I actually didn't know what a polymer alloy was. I've heard the term my whole life, but I've never actually bothered to look it up, or I forgot it. I don't know, I googled it while making this script, and all it basically means is that it's a mixture of polymers, which themselves are molecules formed from monomers, and that's as far as I will go with the learning. Basically, it's a vague term that sounds smart, so they don't have to explain anything in great detail. And well done, it worked on my baby brain. I never once questioned this as a kid. Anyway, whatever this alloy is made up of, it keeps Sonic from damaging the robot. That is until he just buzzsaws through one of Metal Robotnik's arms, so maybe the alloy only covers the main portion of the body. And speaking of, outside of the general actions, not matching up with the real Robotnik, this Robo-Double barely resembles the real Doctor as well. Metal Robotnik has armor that has this visor-like thing on the front of his face, like a knight's helmet, or I don't know, maybe it's a beak. He's got spikes popping out of the top, and his legs are two jointed, giving him a more animalistic look, or potentially a more demonic look, considering all the red and the lightning and the giant bat wings. I don't know why he needs those. He has jet boosters, so maybe the wings just help him navigate in the air. I don't know how flying works, and I don't care either, because this looks cool as hell. I do wonder if whoever designed Metal Robotnik was trying to follow some of the design elements of Metal Sonic, giving hints of what the robot's trying to copy, but bringing enough original elements to make this robot stand out as its own character, even giving some supernatural elements like Metal Sonic has. You could almost believe that this robot was a sentient metal monster from hell, because MR here does not feel like the Robotnik we see presented in the OVA, who is just a goofy, bumbling baddie. Metal, on the other hand, is an intimidating force to be reckoned with. Almost feels more like a copy of the Sad AM version of Robotnik in that sense. But regardless, there's enough here to call Metal Robotnik a character all his own, which is a shame that he isn't, because surprise, turns out that this is yet another mech controlled by Eggman. What a shocker. Metal Robotnik was a genuine attempt to take out Sonic, but its real purpose was to lure him into a trap to help finalize the creation of Metal Sonic. But we're not talking about that wonderful robot just now. We're keeping our focus on Metal Robotnik, and it's kind of a shame the franchise didn't keep their focus on Metal Robotnik. This was a throwaway concept that only made another appearance in a quick cameo in the Archie series. But the spirit of this particular bot would live on in future canon creations. But before we can talk about those robots, we must first discuss the most prominent robo-clones of the Good Doctor out there. The Egg Robo. I know they're kind of cartoony and overused these days, but I will never forget the first time I saw these guys in Sonic and Knuckles. After making your way to Sky Sanctuary and seeing the rise of the Death Egg, does that count as a robot though? No, we're not including bases. Anyway, seeing these little things shoot off from the egg let me know that trouble was on its way, and that trouble came in the form of the Egg Robo, a badnik that stood out from every other one in the game. These strange egg-shaped humanoid robots that looked an awful lot like Robotnik himself. Now, truth be told, it doesn't take much to actually take them out in-game. Like every other badnik, you just have to hop on their heads and they're gone. But seeing them raid these ruins, chasing down little animals, attempting to shoot you with laser guns, really did make them stand out. And now that I'm seeing those guns, you know what? The Egg Glock from the IDW series makes a whole lot more sense now that I think about it. These were the first genuine attempt at a robot meant to take over for Eggman when he himself wasn't present. Not only do they make that clear with this initial invasion, but also in Knuckles' campaign as we see these things run the Eggmobile battles, and even a little more ruthlessly than Robotnik himself, and would see that again in Sonic Superstars. Eggman was so proud of this design, he used the biggest and baddest of the bunch to pilot himself and house the Master Emerald, turning it into a weapon in a last-ditch effort to take down Sonic. The Egg Robo is easily one of the most prominent robot designs in the entire franchise, and really this is the go-to bot when it comes to a robot replica of the main antagonist of the series. This is essentially Metal Eggman. The Egg Robo was even used in Sonic R, where every secret racer was a robotic duplicate of the main cast, except of course for Porian Ingrose. And for the longest time, I thought this was the one and only place this badnik was playable in the franchise, but I'd forgotten that it also appeared as DLC for Sonic Adventure 2's kart racing. Almost feels like a little nod to Sonic R, that's kinda rad. And as you might have noticed, as I mentioned earlier, the Egg Robo name would be used for some other mechs in the series. Outside of the one at the end of S3K, once again you have the Egg Robo battle from Sonic Lost World, which is interesting because that's modern Eggman piloting a mech that looks like classic Eggman. And we also have the Egg Robo Z from Sonic Advance 2, which itself was an upgraded version of Sonic Advance 1's Super Egg Robot. And yes, for the sake of mentioning it, they also have the Hyper Egg Robo in Sonic Advance 3, but outside of the name, it looks nothing like Eggman himself. But hey, I mentioned it because I know somebody was going to complain about it. Now, once the modern designs came into play, the Egg Robos would be replaced by the Egg Pawn in all their many silly varieties or the larger intimidating mech forms. It's been said that the Egg Robo would serve as the basis for what would eventually become the E series, thanks to Sonic Adventure Navigation Guide, which describes Zero as the prototype of the Egg Robo E series. But considering how often Sega throws around the term Egg Robo, nothing's actually been substantiated. And also, I just don't want to talk about the E series today. There's already so much more we have to go through. But this is not where the legacy of the Egg Robo ends. Of course, it showed up in comics, as you'd expect, even has its own toy at this point. But after Sonic Mania came out and expanded the classic era, we were also introduced to the hard-boiled heavies. These are an elite group of Egg Robos that stand out above the rest of Eggman's army, having been transformed by the power of the Phantom Ruby, which still makes no damn sense, but whatever, we're not going to talk about that thing too much here. But even though these guys are far more dangerous than the vanilla Egg Robo, that differentiation ironically makes them far less like the actual Eggman. One's a shinobi, one's a pig, cop, one rides a bug, and another is a magician and apparently a girl. So yes, they clearly all have their own unique personalities, and in turn makes them far less like Eggman when compared to a standard Egg Robo. But then we get to the leader of the bunch, the Heavy King. Now, when I've mentioned this robot before, I had said it reminded me of Saturn Robotnik thanks to the clear intimidation factor of this robot. But as many of you pointed out, the Heavy King clearly takes heavy inspiration from none other than Metal Robotnik, with some clear parallels to Eggman's getup, including those little dangly buttons on modern Eggman's jacket, and that makes this robot extra interesting since it's never shown up anywhere in the modern era. Makes me wonder if Eggy himself took inspiration from his own robot's drip. Now, in terms of actual robot copies of characters, as far as the game canon goes, Heavy King is the closest in terms of a copy along the lines of Metal Sonic to Sonic or Metal Knuckles to Knuckles. Heavy King is not a mech, and he's not a standard badnik. He's not a little random bomb or a sub-boss with Eggman's face on it. Yes, adding those to the list, I know they're also in Mania. He's not a piloted mech, which already makes him a step above Metal Robotnik. This robot might be an Eggman lackey, but clearly he has his own ambitions, and in a lot of ways is a far more capable leader when compared to the actual Eggman. Cold, calculating, demanding authority from all the other hard-boiled heavies, and in every single instance of his appearances, even attempting to dethrone Eggman himself. I mean, the dude has a cape and a scepter, and he calls himself king. Clearly, he's not designed to simply be a yes man. He stays behind the scenes for most of Sonic Mania. You don't ever encounter him in a boss fight in Sonic's main campaign. Instead, he serves as the final boss for Knuckles, fighting atop the stone husks that replace the Super Emeralds as the king attempts to take the energy of the Master Emerald for himself. And can I just say, this is an awesome setting for a boss battle. Now, the king apparently can't take on a super form from the giant gem or the Chaos Emeralds like certain mechanical hedgehogs, but he can still harness the Master Emerald's power into an energy attack thanks to his scepter, as we see in the fight with Knuckles, and again with the Chaos Emeralds when he takes on almost the entire classic cast in IDW's 30th anniversary special. And while he didn't use any of these rocks to go super, he can still use the power of the Phantom Ruby to evolve even further into the Phantom King, powerful enough to take on both Eggman and Super Sonic at the same time. And even without the super gems, he's no pushover, willing to get down in the mud and trade blows with a polar bear. This robot beats up polar bears, that's pretty hardcore. On his own, King has the personality you would expect from a robotic monarch, but I think that works quite well when you play it off against the lighthearted nature of the classic era stories, especially when this version of Eggman is much sillier compared to his modern rendition. This one robot feels like a lovely callback to a lot of other versions of Robotnik and Eggman, or to other Eggman robots long gone. At the same time, it also plays as a wonderful counterpoint to the fleshy version of Robotnik, at least in classic form. Now again, when you consider that we have not seen this robot anywhere in the modern era, you have to wonder what happened to the Heavy King, a robot who has come so close to taking out its own creator on more than one occasion. When you consider that modern Eggman is a bit more fierce, I can't help but wonder if Eggman took inspiration from his own creation, taking on the personality traits from the Heavy King, becoming far more ruthless and taking the king out once and for all to rise up and become the one true ruler of the Eggman Empire. I mean, Eggy does now sport those little dangly button things on his coat that once adorned the royal Robotnik garments of Heavy King, so maybe could just be a flex. Maybe finally defeating Heavy King is what Eggman needed to become the ruthless guy that he is in the modern era. That is a story I would love to see. But that fun little headcanon aside, we simply don't know. And as capable as the good doctor is, his robot double seems a bit too sturdy to take out that easily. I have a feeling that ambitious bot is still out there somewhere, conquering his own kingdom. And maybe someday we will see what that old robot could do against the modern day Egg Fleet. Either way, I would love to see something play out. And even if we don't, the few times we have seen this robot have left quite the impression. And I seriously doubt we've seen the last of the Heavy King. But we have to keep moving on because we have yet another robot double in the game canon to discuss. One that, admittingly, is a couple steps removed from Eggman. I am speaking of Sonic Rush Adventures Captain Whiskers. I will admit I did forget about this guy until researching for this video. And as you can see from the design, obviously it's an Eggman robot double, but really only in design. and even then only in the facial hair. And even then, it's not technically the main canon Eggman. Also, this is a pirate, and he wasn't created by Dr. Eggman, but instead by his Soul Dimension counterpart, Eggman. Nope. Whiskers is indeed a pirate captain, with a couple of robots, Minnie and Mun, always at his side, acting like, I guess, robot parrots in a way. The captain is also in charge of a lot of fearsome enemies, setting out robot pirates and krakens to take on Sonic and Blaze as he attempts to make off with the Jewel Scepter, the MacGuffin of this game. And he's a capable fighting force in his own right, as you have to take him on with his butt bounces and shooty fists, all while he fights alongside his lackey, Johnny. And in a franchise all about speedy, colorful critters with a main villain named Eggman, somehow Captain Whiskers and Johnny take the cake for the silliest bad guy names in the mainline Sonic canon. It sounds like toddlers naming a pair of cats, which is all well and fine. Whiskers is a bit of a bumbling idiot, spouting the most cliched cartoon pirate talk you could ever hope to hear, getting tricked into giving clues on how to get into their secret base, or to let go of a captive raccoon girl who has an Australian accent for no reason. Raccoons aren't native to Australia, whatever. It's all very silly, all very lighthearted, right up until Eggman and other Eggman reveal themselves as the real villains. Why couldn't they just call one Robotnik and the other one Eggman? The guy already had two names. He already had two names. Still switch it around to call one Robotnik and the other one Nobot Rick. I like that name a lot. Nobot Rick. Doesn't have any robots, it's just a guy named Rick. I mean, we could go with Robot Rick, which is also funny, but Nobot Rick is just way funny. What was I talking about? Oh yeah, Sonic Rush Adventure, Captain Whiskers, silly game with a surprising amount of Emerald lore implications. I really gotta revisit this game. I had a lot of fun with it. Anyway, Whiskers drops out of the story the instant the doctors show up, leaving his ultimate fate a bit of a mystery. As far as we know, he's still out there plundering and bumbling across the oceans of the Soul Dimension. He, of course, gets some more stories in the comics, but we will cover those as we get to them when I cover more of the Archie series. And as far as the main game canon goes, that about does it for Robot Doubles. Unless, of course, you want to include the fake Eggman business and Sonic Heroes. I mean, I guess Neo Metal Sonic pretends to be Eggman, so that kind of counts. All that leaves us with is the comics. Yes, of course, save the weirdest for last. First up is another Eggman piloted mech, recently appearing in the IDW Sonic series. While Sonic was teaming up with Eggy to figure out who was behind Clean Sweep Incorporated, Sonic donned the guise of the Phantom Rider to distract and derail the Extreme Gear events that the company was running. And he did all that while riding the Eggstream Gear, very clearly an Eggman creation, one that surely functioned to do more than simply race. And sure enough, once Clutch was discovered to be the big bad boss behind everything, the Extreme Gear transformed into a robotic copy of Robotnik, metal mustache and all, with a screen for a face so the real Eggy could see all the action and guide his robot into a three-way fight between himself, Clutch, and Sonic. Not only did this bot hold his own against Eggman's longtime arch enemy and an elderly possum, it also was the first to get back on its feet after a devastating electric attack from Surge, who used all of her energy to knock out the three fighters. But Eggman, being incredibly prepared, built the Extreme Gear to weather electric attacks, and unlike a lot of other robots we've listed today, this one currently remains at large. As the last we saw of it, the gear was flying off with the unconscious Clutch, leaving Sonic still recovering, unable to do anything about it. A fun robot for sure, but now we have to hop over to much weirder ones. No, not Archie, not yet anyway. Over in Japan, the old mangas had a fake Eggman whose head fell off and flew around to be a real creepy problem. I told you there are so many disembodied eggheads in this video. And here's another one. Kento Bar, the original good version of Robotnik in the Fleetway UK canon, shows up as a computer AI Zordon thing. I don't know if you count that as a robot, but there you go. That's all I could really find. Let me know if I missed anything. Let's just jump to Archie. You knew what was gonna get here. God, it's so wacky. Okay, so there's another computer AI version of Robotnik called Legion if you care. I don't. And if you noticed during my Sonic Live video, there were a lot of alternate dimension Robotniks that seemed to be partially or fully robots themselves, while they built a super buffed giant Robotnik mech, which reminds me the Titan Monarch in Mania kinda counts, I suppose. Falls in between somewhere between being a giant mech or like a base like the Death Egg. I don't know. Look, there's really only one alternate universe Robotnik you really need to care about when it comes to Archie, and I am of course speaking of Robotnik. I have explained this mess before, and God help me, I will have to again eventually. So to my longtime viewers, or to those already knowledgeable, I apologize for being redundant, but for the rest of you, strap in. Alright, so early on, the comic team assumed that they'd be closing up shop around issue 50, so they went out with a bang, killing off Dr. Robotnik. But Sega wanted the comic to keep going, so they diddled around in nonsense stories for a while until Sonic Adventure reared its head, and Sega told everyone to get it together with their goofy canons. It was time to line things up closer to the core game canon. And they have wacky explanations as to why Sonic and Amy have redesigns, and then just sort of brushed over Knuckles and Tails suddenly having different eye colors. And they had to create a whole new emerald since the Archie version of the Master Emerald was just created, and instead of a water god, it had a big furry elephant inside of it. So chaos needed to come from somewhere. So they put him in the Black Emerald. All well and fine. Great. But there was one big round hole left to be filled. How could they bring back Robotnik? And not only that, how were they going to make him look like the game version of Dr. Eggman? Well, way back in the early days, Ken Pender's first story, mind you, we had a whole bunch of alternate dimension Sonics teaming up to take down a Robotnik from a parallel universe. A Robotnik who turned himself into a robot after he was backed into a corner by his version of Sonic, becoming Robot Robotnik. And I dig this design. It's just Robotnik with a dark, slick metallic finish. A chase variant Robotnik. Looks rad. And it was a fun idea. What would happen if Robotnik roboticized himself? It was cool for when they played around with it, but that's all it ever needed to be. But since the main Archie canon no longer had their Robotnik, the writers would use Robot Robotnik to fill that hole. Now, as I stated before, I've heard that this is actually a different Robot Robotnik from the original Robot Robotnik due to some technicalities if you think too much about it, but as I read these issues, I think it's pretty clear that this is the same Robot Robotnik, at least in terms of consciousness. He just transferred himself to a different body. Whether or not all that crap was retconned, I don't know. We don't have time to stick on that one particular detail. The point is, Robot Robotnik was back, but obviously still looks like the original, at least SatAM version of Robotnik, and not the new modern Dr. Eggman. So to solve that, once the Freedom Fighters take out Robot Robotnik, his mind is backed up into yet another robot body. And that body would be none other than Dr. Eggman, which means, yes, in a video about robot copies of Eggman, Eggman himself was a robot. That is how this design was introduced to the Archie comic canon. And they didn't just leave it at that. They gave this guy new powers. He could roboticize anybody with a touch, and he could directly interface with computers by turning his arms all wiry and gooey. It is really gross. And he regained control of the Robian population, dangling Sonic's family right in front of him. He undid a whole lot of progress made by the Freedom Fighters in the absence of their Robotnik in a very short amount of time. And even when the Freedom Fighters managed to take this guy down, he proved to be a problem since, again, all he had to do was back up his mind into different bodies, showing up in a different Eggman robot body that looks even more robot-y, which just means it's silver with a bunch of like microchip patterning all over it. But that was done so aliens could abduct him and Snively and Sonic and Tails and make them swap their fleshy and robot bodies so they could fight each other, and then by the end of it, they're all fleshies. So yes, this is how the comic explained how modern Eggman was back in charge and human. Robotnik was once a man who was turned into a robot, who blew up and transferred into an entirely different robot body, and that robot body was eventually turned into a human. And miraculously, this robot turned flesh looks a lot more like Robotnik's grandfather, Gerald, when compared to the actual canon original version of Robot. Oh, this is just how comics work. These are the stupid hoops you have to jump through to undo shocking page-turning plot twists and deaths, and I'm done. At least I'm done for now. God, I'm gonna have to talk about all of this in speed reading again. We have cracked so many eggs to make ourselves a YouTube video. And what's really ridiculous, as I said up front, I know I have missed something here or there. I haven't watched all the Sonic shows back to back to prepare for this video, and like I said, the man puts his face on everything, and all he makes Robotniks are robots. So if there's anything I missed, please let me know. We can do a follow-up video or maybe just make a few shorts. I don't know. It's crazy how many robot copy characters exist in this franchise. How many years have I done this marathon? I barely even keep it in March anymore. There's so many versions. But man, I love it. I love it so much. I'm not tired of it. I know some of you are. You want me to talk about different robots, but baby, it is about the robot copies. I'm sorry, I don't know what to tell you. I love them so much. And I got a whole lot more to talk about. And I gotta get straight to work on that. Toot toot, Eggman Empire. There's gotta be like a better Robot Warriors? Surely Eggman's used Warriors somewhere in his robot names, right? Maybe? Oh my god, I just thought about the Warriors song that was playing every episode of the Knuckles show. I hate that song so much now. Ugh, god, that show ruins everything. Before we go, I can't leave things without giving a huge thank you to the amazing supporters over on Patreon. This could not be done without you guys. I know I can be a little bit disorganized, but your support and patience has always been incredible, and I sincerely cannot thank you guys enough. But of course, need to give an extra special shout out to these fine folks here. Kyle Winter, Cirrus the Skeptic, Josh Strider, Trey Nobles, Hatsworth, Tiny Jericho, Ginger Bob, Jack of All Spades, Tristan Trapp, Meekers, Bo Bennings, Quote Resident Fanboy, Miles the Prower, Singer J199, Sam Webster, Fish Flop, Lucas Lipker, The Bad Pal, Jonathan Dobbs, Chad, and Mr. SP, Cecil the Glade, The Dark Neon, Stefan Placonica, Three Monic, Graham J. Hall, Lenny X, Wayne Is Boss, David 27 Covers, Trash Baphomet, Enerjack 5, Grayson Conager, Xerxes the Renegade Jin, Ken K, Ven 101, Sindarin 7, Benui, Twilord, Crimson Rose, Roxas the Cat, Godzilla, Makuta of Salt, Gleam the Anomaly, Alexander Watson, Neil Gampa, Conan Kudo, the Lex the most powerful ship in the two universes, Kaido Prower, Spearmint, Hey Nick, why did I find 10 gigs of Metal Sonic X Robo Sally on your computer? Who's Robo Sally? You mean Mecha Sally? Get it together. Omega Man 21, Penn Adelaide, Daza S, Amu is not beating the Tails allegations, just another evil robot clone seeking revenge, Gob, the RSI, Thickle Knocker, Thimble Bumper, the 3? Did I do that right? I don't know. Did I say something offensive? Salem Hollow, Siegfried Wilder, Nabernyard, KB, Tenric Terror, Cho Henshin, Sonicbot, Saki Clips. Saying that right? I think so. And Milowish. Milaush? There's no ish. Why am I doing the ish? Milaush. Guys, thank you so much for the support, and I noticed I have some new names on there to say thank you. I might have said them wrong, so if I did, let me know. But yes, stick around because we have more Mecha March Madness on the way. Toot toot, Sonic Warriors.